This is LBC with Clive Bull. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
And thank you for the comments, the WhatsApps, the texts and the Alexa messages. I'm going to have a look at some of those in a few minutes' time and take some more calls. 0345 6060 973. What do you think are the prospects of some kind of deal coming out of a meeting between Trump and Putin? Let's find out more about what has been planned and what might happen with LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks, who joins us now. Hi, Simon.
Morning, Clive.
So take us through, first of all, what Trump has been saying.
Well, I mean, the big news is the big surprise of the night, as you've been talking about, the fact that this summit meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin is going to take place, according to the US president, next Friday in Alaska. Absolutely nobody had put their money on Alaska being the venue for this summit. There'd been all sorts of suggestions that it might be taking place in the United Arab Emirates, possibly in Istanbul. Earlier in the year, when a meeting between the two leaders was first mooted, Riyadh was one possible location that the Russians and the Americans identified. But suddenly, 2 hours ago, Donald Trump on social media saying the highly anticipated meeting between myself as President of the United States and President Vladimir Putin of Russia will take place next Friday, August the 15th, in the great state of Alaska. Further details to follow. Now, Alaska's a big place. So we don't know exactly where this meeting is going to take place. This will be the first time Vladimir Putin has set foot on American soil for a decade. The last time he was on US soil was 2015 for meetings at the United Nations. He had a meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations with President Barack Obama. That, of course, was after Russia annexed Crimea, but long before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine took place in 2022. The other important thing to underscore, Clive, is that until 1867, Alaska was Russian territory. The United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867. And so the notion that this meeting is taking place there, given that history, and given that the Ukraine negotiation, according to President Trump, is going to be all about both sides having to concede that they are going to give up some territory, is extraordinary. I mean, it's hard to know. Is the United States trying to send a message here and to say, well, you know, Alaska changed from being Russian to American, and that seems to have worked out okay for everybody? Or is Vladimir Putin going to show up and plant the Russian flag on Alaskan soil? I mean, it is mind-boggling that is the location for these talks. And also, I think it's very important to underscore, for Vladimir Putin to be allowed to set foot on American soil at a time when he and leading members of his government are sanctioned to the hilt, have been accused, certainly by the Biden administration, of war crimes in Ukraine, is an astonishing win for Vladimir Putin. The mere fact that they've agreed to do this on American soil is being roundly condemned by foreign policy observers here in Washington, D.C., who say that you shouldn't be giving that away to Vladimir Putin for this first encounter. That should be held back as a gift to bestow much further down the line in talks than these very early stage discussions.
Trump did set this 50 days limit at one point and was threatening sanctions and so on, and that sort of disappeared a little bit. But is this as a result of that, do you think?
Well, today was supposed to be the day, Friday, in the United States, when that deadline expired. And Donald Trump was just a week ago giving every indication that this time it was all going to be for real. He'd had it with Vladimir Putin. He said back in April, I think, that he had begun to conclude that the Russian president wasn't interested in peace in Ukraine and is simply tapping me along. And that was the beginning of Donald Trump's frustration growing with the Russian leader. In the event, as he has done so many times in the past, when Donald Trump gets to a fork in the road, and he said that he's going to take the fork that leads to tougher sanctions and punishment of Russia, he then finds a way to avoid engaging in that. And that's what he's done this time around by agreeing to meet Vladimir Putin in Alaska next Friday. It's very unclear whether there are any preconditions that have been set for these talks. 24 hours ago, it all looked like it might be heading south because White House officials had been briefing reporters and telling them that a precondition for the talks was for Vladimir Putin to agree also to a three-way meeting with Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And then Trump last night at the White House undercut those officials and said, no, I'll settle for a meeting with Putin. Zelensky doesn't have to be there. And you will have heard on our news bulletins Donald Trump talking about the need for both sides to understand that they're going to have to give away territory. Well, it's far from clear that the Russians understand that, because the news agency TASS, a mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin, today said that he's going to tell Donald Trump he wants the whole of eastern Ukraine. Far from giving anything up that he's already won there, he wants even more of it. And for Volodymyr Zelensky, he is constitutionally prevented from ceding territory. He's not in a position simply to give away territory without taking some kind of action in Ukraine to overcome a constitutional block on that. So this is going to be an incredibly complex process. And one of the things that we've witnessed since his return to the White House in January is that Donald Trump doesn't really like these things when they become very complex. He wants everything to be done and dusted quickly so he can get on and make his claim for the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, this is not, in a week's time, this thing is not going to be meaningfully more resolved than it is tonight.
A number of our listeners have been texting and commenting about the Nobel Peace Prize and saying that's really what it's all about. I mean, do you think that really is part of his motivation?
Well, I think, to be fair to Donald Trump, I think he's genuinely motivated by a desire to try and bring peace to conflict zones around the world, not always for entirely altruistic reasons, because he believes that, you know, it's far easier for peaceful nations to trade with one another than it is for warring nations to do so. And for Donald Trump, everything comes back to trade. Indeed, the Russians are very aware of that. They say that they want absolute clarity over the fact that this should be a meeting all about improving the bilateral relationship between not Russia and Ukraine, but Russia and the United States, because they want to take advantage of some of the economic partnership deals that Donald Trump wants to pursue in Russia. So I think he's genuinely motivated by a desire to end conflicts. And there's no doubt whatsoever that he wants to get his arms around the Nobel Peace Prize, which I suspect is one of the reasons why our Prime Minister and other European leaders were told this week, don't think you're getting a seat around the table when I sit down with Vladimir Putin. Don't think you're going to be there when I bring Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky together for any talks that might take place, because Trump wants to be the sole broker of all of this. Partly because that will put him, he thinks, in the leagues with the big giants on the world stage, the hardline rulers, the authoritarians that he admires, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping of China and others, but also partly because he doesn't want to share the glory with anybody else.
And this concept of swapping territories, is this not a bit of a misnomer? Because there isn't territory that Ukraine has taken from Russia. Isn't Absolutely. It more about just which bits can you keep and which bits can we have back?
Well, there is a small sliver of Russian land that the Ukrainians briefly occupied at one point when they were beginning to advance militarily into sort of the Russian hinterlands along the border. But you're absolutely right. One of the phrases that Donald Trump used today that leaves you kind of scratching your head is, we're going to get some territory back. He said, we're going to get some back and we're going to get some switched. Well, who's the we here? I mean, who is that? It's very unclear. He never speaks about Ukraine and the United States as we. I mean, that would run completely counter to the way in which he's treated Volodymyr Zelensky, even blaming the Ukrainians for starting a war that obviously was started by Russia. Hard to know precisely what that phrase meant. And this notion that, you know, you can very quickly sit down and get an agreement between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, neither of whom want to give up any territory. Ukraine, of course, argues that the territory it's lost to Russia, including the Crimea, is sovereign Ukrainian territory. These kinds of negotiations, as we saw, after the Vietnam War, after we've seen after all sorts of other conflicts, can be very lengthy and very slow to bear fruit. So if the White House genuinely thinks, and Steve Witkoff, the US special envoy, meeting with Putin earlier in the week, if they really think that they can wave some kind of magic wand at this and bring it to a rapid conclusion, I mean, good luck. Donald Trump certainly thinks outside the box. He certainly demonstrated the ability to bring some hostilities in various parts of the world to a standstill since he returned to the Oval Office. But I think this is going to be very, very hard road to wander down, and it's not going to be done quickly.
And just a couple of questions from people texting in asking, is it definitely going to happen? Would Putin definitely turn up? Would he be worried about being arrested by the Americans for some reason? Would everyone be entirely safe? And how are they going to pick somewhere in Alaska?
Yeah, I mean, there's no prospect whatsoever of Vladimir Putin being arrested on American soil during Donald Trump's presidency. I mean, I think we know enough. I mean, the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin remains mysterious and has never been fully explained. Donald Trump clearly beguiled by the Russian president for some reason, but absolutely no. I mean, he's going to be an honored guest of President Trump in Alaska if this meeting takes place. I mean, the fact that they've now announced it, I think probably gets it closer to reality than it looked like it was going to be 24 hours ago. But, you know, a week is a long time in anyone's politics, and by next Friday, who knows where we're all going to be. But if the Americans are agreeing to a meeting without preconditions, then I think Vladimir Putin will grab the opportunity to sit down with Donald Trump, because Putin is confident that after so many years in the Kremlin, you know, the first president he dealt with as Russian leader was Bill Clinton. So he thinks he can play Donald Trump like a violin. He sees him coming. He thinks that he can deflect. He can kick the ball on Ukraine into the long grass, tantalize the American leader with promises of economic riches to be enjoyed by American companies if only they can be persuaded once again to take the risk of investing in Russia. I think he covets this meeting and will be extremely eager for it to take place. As to where it's going to take place, I was reminded earlier tonight that, of course, Sarah Palin, the former governor of Alaska, in many ways a bit of a precursor to Donald Trump and in his Make America Great Again movement politically. She once falsely claimed in a debate that she could see Russia from Alaska. Well, you can't actually see it, but they are close, and one wonders if it might be at the point that is closest between the Russian coastline and the American coastline on the tip of Alaska, but we just don't know where it's going to happen.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Great to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Simon Marks there, LBC's Washington correspondent.